So a warm welcome to all our colleagues who've tuned in and are interested in learning about how to found, lead and grow a thriving and professionally satisfying workplace investigations practice. My name is Sarah Ryan. For those of you who don't know me, I recently stepped away from chairing the AAWI and also ceased being a director of the US Association. Angela Stoller is our new Australasian representative. I too am a workplace investigator and also manage the workplace relations and investigations practice called Justicia Lawyers and Consultants based in Melbourne, Australia. AAWI brings together a lively and supportive community across several countries, and we know that there's been a big range of interest in this particular session. So what we intend to do is a pre-recording with some background information on our three speakers, and then to bring people together for the purpose of further discussion and questions. In addition to that, I'd also like to obviously urge people to become members and take advantage of all the benefits of membership, including listserv, where you can throw questions out and get answers from a very generous Australasian and also US Canadian audience, and also attend our other events like our successful conference that took place in September in Auckland. So I'm going to move on now to share with you very briefly the backgrounds on our three panellists who are very representative of many of the people that will be tuning into this webinar in terms of the structure of their practices and their interests in workplace investigations. So we have Sophie Gladwell, who with another person being Sally Scoville, founded Scoville & Co. 2.5 years ago. And they're set up as a law firm specialising in workplace investigations, and they're based in Auckland, New Zealand. Christina Glover is an HR specialist, a mediator, in addition to being also a workplace investigator, and she's based in Sydney, Australia, and operates a solo practice called HR Spectrum. And lastly, we have Andrew Howard, who is an accountant by training and a partner at international accounting firm BDO, located in Brisbane, Australia. His practice has a focus more on the forensic side of workplace investigations. So I'm going to get started with my questions. And the first one is very much wanting to hear from each of our three panellists, their story about how they founded their firms or built their practices over time. And I'm going to start with Sophie to invite you to share that story with our listeners.
Yeah, so I met my business partner, Sally, when our children were young, just at our local creche. We were both lawyers. We'd had similar career paths. So we'd started off in large corporate firms and ultimately left when we had our children. And I think both of us were in a bit of a holding pattern, trying to figure out what the next step was going to be. We were very committed to using our legal skills, but in a way that we were able to maintain some sort of work-life balance. And I think ultimately we decided that we had to be in control of whatever we did if that was going to be the case. And so we chatted over a couple of years and had sort of a couple of different ideas of what we could do. And then Sally fortuitously had the opportunity to do a couple of investigations as a consultant, and approached me and said, I think there's an opportunity in New Zealand for this. The market wasn't, was sort of establishing itself, but was, very much in a formative stage. And we did a bit of research into that. And yeah, that was the beginning of us setting up the firm. Yeah.
And so you intentionally set up as a law firm, even though you're focusing on workplace investigations.
Yeah. So at that time, there weren't any law firms in New Zealand specialising exclusively in workplace investigations. And we also do cultural reviews. But we did a bit of research and saw that it was very established in other jurisdictions. So we looked to Canada, to the US, and also to Australia, and saw that there were firms there that were specialising exclusively in this work. And so we felt like it was a good option for us. We looked at establishing as a consultancy, but it made sense to become a law firm since we were both lawyers and we wanted to continue to practice as lawyers and hold our practicing certificates.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good. So, and Christina, you've got a busy practice in Sydney. solo practice in this case. So how did you get to this point?
My background is in HR. I'm not a lawyer, different to Sophie. In around 2010, I was working in an outsourced head of HR role for an organisation, and a bullying complaint was received into the organisation by one of the employees, and I was tasked with the investigation. I had never done one before, and our external employment lawyer guided me through the process, which I found to be quite terrifying, but also very interesting. And it really sparked my interest to, I guess, explore what this might look like a little bit more if I was to move into this kind of specialised niche of workplace investigations. So I decided to do a bit of training in the area. I did a lot of networking, and I was able to tap into some clients who took a leap of faith and referred some investigations to me. Once I started to build technical competence and did a good job, I found that one referral would lead to another, and that sort of is how I grew my, well, started and then grew my practice. And in 2012, I created HR Spectrum Proprietary Limited, and I haven't looked back. So since then, I've added some other strings to my bow, and I found that's been really complementary for my offering. I became a nationally accredited mediator, so that's been very complementary to the investigations work I do. And I also got my accreditation in executive coaching. So I've enjoyed both of those. They've been quite complementary, but my bread and butter work is very much still workplace investigations. And similar to Sophie, the cultural review kind of work has been very interesting to be exploring as well. So that's a little bit of my background, how I got here.
Good. Thank you, Christina. Now, I know Andrew's in a different boat altogether, working within a large organisation.
Yeah, thanks. As mentioned, I'm an accountant by trade, so I guess I'm a little bit different. So I got into the field of forensic accounting probably around 15 years ago now. And I guess like most industries, I guess that area has changed significantly over the last decade. So if I think back to kind of like my first fraud investigation, we were kind of reviewing hundreds of checks, and we had handwriting experts to help kind of identify fraud, signatures, etc. So fast forward 10 years, and now instead of kind of dealing with checks, we're dealing with terabytes of data. So I guess as part of those investigations, we were really leveraging forensic technology a lot as well. So imaging of computers, email, text message reviews, theft of IP, recovering deleted data and evidence and those sorts of things. And as we kind of continued to build our forensic offering and capability in this area, we're often being engaged, I guess, to assist with non-financial investigations or workplace investigations more and more, particularly around unauthorized access of information or release of documents. We've been called upon to, again, image mobile devices, help with email searches, text messages searches, and those sorts of things. So I guess as the team also, we're kind of highly skilled with interviewing and investigations. We found that our role naturally progressed from providing, I guess, forensic support for workplace investigations to being engaged to actually undertake and help lead the investigations and the reporting, and then kind of leverage our forensic capability as well. So there's a bit of a shift over time. So I guess today we do have quite a diverse team. So we're not all just accountants like myself. So we've got a team of investigators, I guess, across Australia. Again, not only forensic accountants, but we've got forensic technology specialists, former detectives, law enforcement officers. We've got some criminologists, forensic data analysts, and even a couple former CCC and DPP officers in the team as well, which bring kind of a really diverse range of skills to the workplace investigations that we do.
And have you got any comments on the evolution over time? Have things changed a lot from back in the day?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, the biggest change is technology. What we find with the investigations that we're doing now is that there can be a really diverse range of evidence. So again, if I think from an accounting perspective, most people think of evidence just in an accounting system, but there's a lot more than that. We've got email, text messages, GPS tracking, all sorts of things. And likewise with workplace investigations, while primarily a lot of the evidence is verbal evidence, there's still a lot of evidence that can be looked at and reviewed again via message apps, text messages, emails. So I guess that's kind of what we've been leveraging and the difference that we've seen over time.
Mm-hmm. Good, thank you. So when you, in particular, Christina and Sophie, thought about setting up your practices, did you do a lot of thinking about where the work might come from before you did that? Maybe start with you, Sophie.
Yeah, we did. We knew there was kind of a need in the market. We talked to, you know, colleagues and friends of ours that were working as employment lawyers, and so we knew that there was a need for specialists in this space. And then really when we set up, we very much just reached out to our networks. So we really just had coffee with anyone that we could think of that we could get connected with, that we thought might be useful. So that included other investigators who were already established and working, barristers. We met with the employment law partners, and we also just, you know, we even had friends connect us with people who they thought would be helpful to us. And it really worked. Like that process of just kind of networking and getting in front of people, you know, has led to work and still continues to lead to work. So yeah, that.
And how do you maintain your connections with those people so that they keep giving you work?
Well, I think it worked to our advantage that we set up as a law firm. We obviously had pre-existing relationships with people in the firms and in the big firms that we'd worked with previously. And I don't know if we put a lot of thought into it, but actually setting up as a law firm and only doing what I call neutral work, so not doing employment advisory work, meant that we were able to form these relationships with, you know, employment law teams, and they were very comfortable using us, referring their clients to us. We would do, you know, we do the investigation and then the client goes back and they continue to advise. So there was no concern around us potentially taking the client, I suppose, and that's really served us very well and continues to. We have very close working relationships with, you know, many of the law firms, not just in Auckland now, but around New Zealand as well. Yeah.
And Christina, you're also reliant on others to send work your way. Did you give much thought to that when you started out?
My approach was quite exploratory at the beginning, I would say, and fluid. I would attend, for example, a networking event or an industry event or a training, like an employment law masterclass, and then I was really keen to follow up with the presenters. So I would contact them, and I would often meet for a coffee. We'd establish a rapport. I wanted to learn what they, you know, who they were currently using, who they were referring work to, understand and share where my point of difference might be. I remember meeting with some of these potential referral partners up to like 3 or 4 times for coffee, and I'd sit there and think, am I ever going to be able to work with you? Is this going to work? Of course, I wouldn't say that, but I'd be thinking, I really want to give this a go, and I hope that you'll take a leap of faith. And persistence absolutely paid off. So for me, that personal touch was the right way to go. Importantly for me, I became a member of an entrepreneurial group. We would meet once a week in the city. And that was really helpful because it helped to not only establish a network for me of providers for people that I needed for my own business, accountant, insurance, employment lawyer, someone who I could be having some mentorship, all sorts of things that you need, services as well. But it also helped me to hone my pitch a little bit. So it helped me to really, really define what I wanted to do, what I could offer, what my delivery was. And it, linked, for example, some great tips from a marketing person who was in the group would say, your LinkedIn page needs to match your website. There needs to be consistency. You should be asking for recommendations every time you do some work. So for me, that was helpful to kind of get this all-rounded building approach. And you know, in addition, perhaps it was a speaking engagement I'd do through the RE Human Resource Institute, or an article that I'd write here and there. So for me, it sort of was a slow build, but the personal touch through networking was my main driver. Building rapport and persistence.
And how long do you think that slow build took?
I think it took, it was pretty lumpy for the first few years of that work, but I was coming out of some other consulting work, so I was okay with that. But I think realistically, it probably took between 3 and sort of 4 or 5 years to establish those relationships. Now I've been working, you know, for 10 years with some of these people. And so you just have that time, you have the runs on the board, you have their, you know, gained their trust, all those sorts of things. So it takes a bit of time and persistence, as I said. They won't immediately use you, I wouldn't imagine, unless you're offering all sorts of amazing things that you have to then deliver on. So and you're responsible for all your marketing, unlike Andrew. Yeah.
And Andrew, you know, some people might assume that working in a big practice that everything gets handed to you on a platter in terms of on your desk and the work that you do. Do you have to also market in your role?
Yeah, absolutely. I think while being part of BDO and a global firm certainly has advantages, I think at the end of the day, you just can't underestimate the importance of BD and marketing. So kind of building those relationships, and, you know, when clients have a need for our investigation services, you know, it's generally a stressful situation, and often comes with a bit of urgency as well. So they need to be able to pick up the phone and speak to someone, engage someone that they can trust. And in my view, the only way that you'll get that trust with clients, apart from doing a fantastic job, of course, but is building those relationships and kind of developing your network and leveraging your network as you go through.
And I think one of the things we advertised about this event was that we share what technologies people are using, which anyone who's starting out as an investigator will be most interested to hear about. And probably the bigger the organisation, the more on offer that they have. So I might start with you, Andrew, and BDO. What range of technologies do you work with?
Yeah, no worries. As mentioned previously, technology forms a large part of, I guess, our everyday investigation and work. So whether it's leveraging data analytics, e-discovery platforms, or I guess the various tools we use to help kind of recover deleted data or image computers, I guess it's all aimed to ensure that we obtain the best evidence and the relevant evidence possible. So just some examples, I guess. You know, we've recently leveraged data analytics on a financial investigation. So we traced, you know, 60,000 bank transactions through 70 bank accounts to help identify patterns of fraudulent transactions. So to do something like that manually would be very, very difficult. E-discovery, obviously a platform that we regularly use. So whether it's something like Nuix Discover or Relativity, it's a platform that allows us to ingest a whole range of data, including emails. So again, particularly with workplace investigations, it allows us to kind of search whole data sets, whether it's emails, messages, text messages, efficiently and effectively to, again, obtain any relevant evidence that is useful for the investigation. Kind of underpinning all that as well, we have some really robust case management systems in place for all our investigations. So this includes everything from investigation logs, evidence logs. We've got the capability of only being able to give access to certain team members to investigations, so we can really ensure confidentiality. And those systems all have full audit logs as well. So can be very useful for telling exactly who's accessed what and when. But I think it's fair to say that, yeah, all our investigations are certainly tech heavy and tech focused.
Mm-hmm. And compared to that, Sophie, what about you?
Well, we're probably the other end of the spectrum. You know, our technology is essential because our entire practice is remote, and our junior team members work around the country as well. But really, you know, it's very simple. We're using sort of time recording software, accountancy software, Microsoft Word, obviously Microsoft Teams, and Zoom has become essential for us. But really it's, you know, given the nature of the investigations we're doing, which would be predominantly sort of bullying and harassment type investigations, yeah, that sort of, it suffices for most of our investigations. We get an additional support where we need it. If we've got a huge amount of documentation, we might use discovery services or transcription services and translation services at times. Yeah, but that's sort of on an as needed basis.
And Christina, is your situation similar?
Similar to Sophie, my laptop is my tool of trade. Mediations, no technology. I had never thought that we could be, if someone had said to me 2 years ago, you know, that you'll be conducting mediations with people in remote areas or, you know, different countries or whatever, all online, I would have never believed them. But that's actually been quite a silver lining to this pandemic, and it's opened up all sorts of doors, and it's been really awesome to be able to have these, you know, discussions, interviews, mediations, facilitated discussions, whatever it is, online with people all over the world. And so that's been pretty good. My other, it's not a technology, but a good sprinkling of pixie dust is often helpful with mediations and some difficult investigative interviews. So at times.
And I think, well, the pandemic and the move to online platforms has potentially revolutionised our space in the work tools of trade in terms of our work, but likewise it's educated the whole community, hasn't it? So whereas in the past there might have been some resistance or some hesitancy about being in a online remote interview, now I think people have really adjusted, and if anything, it's almost like a preference sometimes to be in that setting. It feels safer to be in that setting even than face to face. So yeah, so it's, and I know that many sessions in the various conferences that we've held in the association have looked at that sort of change over time. Which goes to the next point I wanted to ask you all about, which is around training and keeping yourselves up to date with developments. So I might start with you, Andrew. And I'm interested, you mentioned a whole range of technologies. You know, does someone who works at BDO or works in your particular practice, do they need to have an accounting background, or do you have an array of people with different professional or disciplinary backgrounds?
Yeah, exactly that. So like I said, we're quite a diverse team. So there's only a handful of us that are accountants. And I think probably the majority of the people in our team have different qualifications or different backgrounds. At core, we're obviously all trained in investigations. And then from there, I guess the various team members will have their areas of specialisation. So if it's someone from our forensic technology part of the team, they'll have obviously the FTech credentials. Likewise, if it's accounting or data analytics, they'll have the relevant qualifications and skills. But probably the one thing I would say is that because with the work we are doing, it is constantly changing. We are having to also constantly keep up with new trends and training and courses, which I think is a good thing as well.
And you've got a accounting background, but you've done some forensics training as well.
Yeah, that's right. So I recently finished a forensic course through Macquarie University. I've also got my Certificate 3 in investigations. And then on top of that, I'm currently in the process of finalising my studies of Certificate 4 of Government Investigations and Diploma of Government Investigations. So I think gone are the days where you kind of finish university and think that your studies are finished. So I think, as I said before, it's important to kind of continue to study, push yourself, and be open to learning new things. And
Sophie, what inputs have you had over the last period of time?
Well, when we started off, I think we did every course, we read every book that we could, we met with everyone. that we could, and that was brilliant, and that served us well. And we were all geared up to head off to the States to do the AAWI Training Institute. And of course, COVID hit and stalled that. And I was lucky enough to be able to participate in the virtual institute in September, which was brilliant. I mean, I would have loved to have been there in person. You can see when you participate in the course how amazing it would have been to be sort of face to face with everybody over there. But they did an excellent job over Zoom. You know, they sort of have breakout sessions, and the chat feature was going constantly. And it was, yeah, very, very well done. So it made the 3 a.m. starts for the Kiwis worth it. It's difficult timing for the Antipodeans, but yeah, I highly recommend it to anyone that's considering.
And you've provided feedback on the timing, as I understand it.
I have, and I'm hopeful, particularly for the Australians, that they reconsider the timing, because I just, you know, it was difficult for the New Zealanders, but there were no Australians on the course, which is probably indicative of the poor start time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So in addition to being legally qualified, that's been the most tailored course that you've done?
Yes, it has. I also have to mention there's an Australian textbook published by WorkLogic called Workplace Investigations, which I still think is just an absolutely brilliant text. And then there's a couple of New Zealand texts specifically on, for example, workplace bullying, which have also been essential. So I've got those in the library and I still look at them all the time. But then I suppose the other thing Sally and I do is we obviously have each other to bounce, you know, issues off, but also we reach out regularly to other investigators. So if tricky procedural issues come up, we you know, we'll get on the phone to people and talk them through, and that's just invaluable. I think having that network around you is really important, especially if you're just a small practice or on your own. Yeah.
And what about you, Christina? How do you keep yourself current?
Certainly through ongoing professional development. So that might be attending a conference. There have been a couple that I've attended through the AAWI, which I've really enjoyed and have found to be so beneficial. And I would love to do the Institute training. I mean, the US would be fantastic to go, but we'll see what comes maybe next year in terms of an online offering. I think that in our space, the professional development piece is very important, and particularly when you're, I don't have a group of, you know, the colleagues to bounce things off. So I need to have networks that I can be interacting, understanding the latest, perhaps HR, ER/IR issues, and that's why I'm part of a separate ER/IR committee through ARI. Obviously, I'm on AAWI. I go to networking events, and that's always helpful. And I think ongoing professional development is important. So, for example, next year I've enrolled in an AICD company director course. Part of the driver of that is to really get into the nitty-gritty of some corporate governance issues and to understand and expand perhaps from a different perspective, because I'm often presenting to a board and I'd like to be able to understand from the learning and PD perspective a little bit more around those issues. So I think just if we can get a really well-rounded way of upskilling yourself and staying up to date, then that's really helpful and important in what we do.
And my other question, which I did give you a bit of notice about, or it's a double-barrel question now, but which is about one thing that you really like about what you're doing in your work, and perhaps one challenge and how you overcome that. So I might start with you, Andrew.
Yeah, no worries. I think the thing that I like most about the work we do and the job is that kind of every investigation we do is different. So when you think you've seen it all, something new will come along. So I think from the interest perspective, absolutely, that's what kind of keeps me engaged. In terms of challenges, I think most of us would agree, probably the peaks and troughs. So everything we do is one-off. So being kind of able to plan yourself months in advance can often be difficult because we don't really have visibility of what future work we have. Conversely, we often get an urgent call and we need to be on site within an hour, whether it's to help kind of triage a situation or preserve evidence. So I guess just trying to balance the peaks and troughs. Obviously, all the investigations we do are important and urgent, but again, it is a bit of a skill to balance it all, I think. And
a skill that's learnt over time, to know how to manage your energies, manage your clients, and not stress out about it, which young people can find more challenging. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I said I've been doing it for 15 years. So if someone's got the magic answer, feel free to reach out to me and let me know, because it's always changing, but it's a skill that you learn over time, but I think continue to learn over time as well. Mm-hmm. And Sophie, what do you like about what you're doing now?
I suppose I love that it's project-based. It's pretty unusual in the law to kind of start and finish something, and we don't sort of have those, our relationships, our client relationships really are with the employment lawyers as opposed to the clients directly, and it means that we kind of start a project, we take it on, we do it, and we finish it. And that for us, having, Sally and I both have young children, and it just means that we have total control over our work, and we decide whether we've got capacity to take the work on, and if we don't, then we'll pass it on to other investigators or to each other. That works really well as well. So that's been a fantastic part of doing this work that I don't think we'd get in many other areas of the law from my previous experience. In terms of what's difficult, I think this work, or at least the nature of the investigations that we're doing, they can be grueling. People can be very, very emotional. There's a lot on the line often when we're conducting these investigations. And I think I mentioned to you that, I would say at least once in every investigation I do, at the end of an interview, someone says to me, "I don't know how you do this for a job." And I think most investigators have heard that many, many times. And I think it's, I love working in a firm with another person, because we talk to each other all the time, and we can sort of debrief after difficult interviews and sort of problem solve issues as they arise together. But it can be draining, and that feeling of kind of issuing a final investigation report and knowing, the possible outcome after it, I think is always, it's a weight that sits with all of us. So yeah, that's probably the toughest part. And I think with intent, you've partnered with someone else to run your organisation, and that's one of the benefits, that you have a sounding board. Yeah. And I know, Christina, we've talked with you about your sounding boards, and anyone watching will completely understand the grueling nature of the work and the importance of keeping sane in the process. So I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Pros and cons, similar to Andrew and Sophie. I love the variety. I love that I can go into an organisation at the most senior levels, sitting at a boardroom table, or interviewing the CEO or the general counsel, or whatever, whoever the lucky people are. But I love too that I can know when it'll finish, and I don't have to worry about any politics. And so there's a start, there's a stop, and it's varied and sufficiently senior and really interesting work. So for me, that's all the pros. The difficulty, I think, of working on your own is I don't have someone necessarily who's in it and working with me on something to bounce the ideas off. I do have a mentor who consults with me, and who I'm able to have peer review and things. So that is helpful at that last piece before I'm delivering a report. But sometimes it'd be nice to kick an issue around and to sort of shoulder that. And I think the other challenge as well when you're working in my model is that it's the work-life balance is there on the one hand, but it's also blurred. If I own business, sometimes I take on more than I probably should, and I will work through a night or a weekend to ensure timely delivery. And I want to do that for the clients, but sometimes it's quite exhausting, and it's a client might call who you've worked with for so long, and you've established such an amazing rapport, and they trust you, and of course you want to say yes to the work when you're already at capacity, so that can be a little bit challenging. But of course they wouldn't know that, and you're like a swan just swimming along the surface, and underneath you're just paddling like crazy, to stay afloat, and and we do. It always works out, but sometimes it's a little bit tiring in the meantime. Self-care is an important part of what we do. Yeah.
And only you know really how you're managing at the end of the day. So you have to listen closely to that, don't you, in terms of your energy levels and agreeing to do something and then being able to deliver on that.
Yeah.
So one other question for Andrew. Do you have any advice for anyone that's thinking about moving into this space that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think if you're passionate, absolutely go for it. And I think if you're going with a willingness to learn, be open and balanced, and I think being a team player, you'll be quite successful. I think, I guess I'm quite lucky being in a larger team that we do have that support network, which I think is important. So if you're not part of a team environment and you are working on your own, I think, again, absolutely important to try and get a support network and be able to reach out and bounce ideas off each other, because you know, what we do sometimes is hard, and it is good to be able to kind of debrief and I guess get the support of other key people.
Great, thank you. Sophie.
I think in terms of setting out would really be to sort of meet with as many people as you can, reach out to them. Our experience has always been, if you ask people for help or guidance, that they are very willing to give you their time. And we now find, Sally and I have people contacting us about, setting up a practice, and we'll do the same thing. We'll meet with them and talk them through it. I think it's important to understand the nature of the work. Like I say, it is grueling. It's not for everybody. But like Christina and Andrew, we find it fascinating and really rewarding work. So yeah, but it is something to go into with your eyes open. Yeah, especially if you're going to do it full time, like we do, like Christine does. Yeah.
Good advice. Christina.
For me, I think it's helpful if you're considering going in or early stages, find someone who understands what you do, maybe a good mentor, someone that you can ride the journey with, who can help you to sometimes pull back from the detail and see the bigger picture and help you plan a little bit around where you go. I found that to be really helpful because they might consider things that I had been too entrenched in the detail to consider. So they will help you work a little bit more on your business, not just in your business. That might be important for anything, be it, just different business thoughts that are important, from charging to insurance to all sorts of, referrals to training, all sorts of things. So I would be trying to get someone and go under their wing a little bit and see if you can share the journey a little bit as much as you can. Yeah.
Good, thank you. So I think I'm going to leave it there. That really is an introduction to yourselves, what you're doing. You've explained very generously why you do what you do, and a bit about structure and how you do it. And I think there'll be further questions to come from the discussion with people who listen to this, either as a visual or as a podcast potentially. So we'll definitely circulate this now and then invite a further discussion. And I'm sure there'll be further interesting questions for each of you about what you're doing. So thank you so much on behalf of everyone, on behalf of the AAWI. And I certainly hope you will have a great end of the day in different time zones for all of us. And I look forward to reconnecting then for the discussion with the broader membership very shortly. So stay safe and goodbye.
Thanks, Sarah.